And then we have to speak English together.
Okay.
It's going to be weird after speaking Danish and Norwegian.
No, and I get to learn I switch all the time.
Yeah, yeah, you must. Okay, so let's start from the top. You're Vibeke Vestby from Digital Weaving Norway. And the first question that I wrote before we came here is kind of asking about your background as a weaver and how it led you to develop this loom that we'll be talking a lot about today. And I think maybe we should just explain what the name is of this loom, because we're going to be saying it so much. So it's the TC1 and the TC2, and what is that name? And once you've explained the name, then maybe we can take it from the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last first, TC stands for thread controller. One was the first one and two the successor. The reason why we named it TC was that I was afraid of using the term jacquard because it was patented and protected and originally related to needles and springs, which were in the original patent from 1801 or something.
Oh, so it was a patent thing as well. That sounds really interesting.
But I wasn't quite sure, but I thought when I explain what the loom is, people say, so it's a jacquard, and it kind of does exactly the same as a jacquard, but it's based on another mechanical technical solution.
So what would you say is the main difference between a jacquard and the TC1 and TC2?
The jacquard was technology developed around the end of 1700 and early 1800, and of course then they used what they had, so it was the punched cards with the holes, and then the jacquard head was above the warp, usually 3 meters above, and then you had multiple strings from each hook down to repeats in the weaving. But we chose to put the control mechanism directly above the warp, so you could have one-to-one. Each unit in the TC2 head controls one heddle, one warp thread, and that means you have no repeats. You can have absolutely no repeats from one side to the other.
Yeah. Sorry. So in that sense, it is actually, you get more technical opportunities, and it's also like a big step forward. I don't know, I guess in industry maybe they do have some jacquard looms with just one repeat.
Yes, but then when I started to see electronic jacquards, I think the first ones were maybe 1986 or maybe 4 years before that. But the electronic jacquard started to control a limited number, like 1344 for some reason was very well established.
Yeah.
And then it was because the technology was expensive and included a lot of new technology, so they kept on using the principle of having the head high up and multiple strings coming down, even if you had the electronics. And of course now, some years later, I think maybe around 1995, you started to see what they call jumbo jacquards, which could control up to 10,000 or more threads individually, but it was still 5-6 meters up in the air and with the strings. So it has been. I think these days there's a couple of looms with the control mechanism directly above the warp, but I choose to say they were inspired by us and not the other way around.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how often technological development is just inspired by what was already and then tweaking, where you really in a lot of ways started over, even if you had this very old craft that you knew really well.
Yes. Yes, because you ask where did I come from, and so my background was hand weaving, and in Norway that was a very traditional type of training. Our teacher taught us how to weave placemats, kitchen towels, bedspreads, that kind of things. And I felt there was a big missing link, because I had books on Chinese silks with dragons and clouds and peonies, and I thought, when are they going to teach us how to weave this? And I realized that my teachers had no clue how that was accomplished.
Oh, interesting.
And so I thought in Scandinavia we're all thinking about the wefts because we had wool and thick materials.
So for anyone listening who isn't randomly, if there might be
Mm.
one person listening who doesn't already know a lot about weaving, so we have the warp, which is inside the loom,
Yes.
and then the weft is what you put in from the side.
Right.
Yeah, and what's special about the TC2 loom is that you do that by hand, like we were talking about industry. In industry, you have a lot of requirements for what kind of weft you can use because of that. But that's another thing that makes the TC2 so special, that you have this more artistic ability with the material choices, right?
Yes, because what I wanted was that freedom that you can weave a photograph or a text or a naturalistic drawing, a little bit like you can do in tapestry weaving, but tapestry weaving takes years to accomplish a big format. So I thought if we could take the technology which was from the punched cards, the jacquards, and adapt it to a hand loom, it would open up a whole new world for hand weavers who had been confined to stripes or checks and weft dominated weave structures.
Yeah, I really, this thing, I have to edit this out. But yeah, that's another thing that we didn't cover, I guess. So you were saying that with the jacquard loom, it was these punch cards, and as we spoke about yesterday, actually these punch cards, I think we spoke about yesterday, these punch cards were like the first step towards what became the modern day computer. So you have zeros and ones and this binary system. But another big difference between the old jacquard at least and the TC2 today is that you control it on a computer. Just because maybe some people listening, they only know more traditional kind of weaving where you kind of do it in the tie up physically on the loom. But the TC2, you have it connected to a computer and you do the programming on there.
Yes, and it was because I had this discovery that the computer works on zeros and ones, like holes, no holes, and that it was actually a big detour to make the punched cards. You could go directly to sending signals to the headers, whether it should be lifted or not. And one more step back was when I was graduating from my weaving education. I had accidentally chosen to explore variations of twill weaves, and I was discovering that I had to change the tie-up of my loom like every second day, and I spent more time under the loom than over the loom, and I thought doing that was time consuming, but even more was to make the point paper for each of these designs. And I thought, if this is weaving, I'm not cut for this. You know, this was just too time consuming.
Yeah.
So that's when I was thinking, what should I do then? I took a year of computer programming at the university because I thought I wanted to find out how close this is.
So after you finished your degree in hand weaving, then you took a year of programming?
Yes. And that's when I realized that you know, for a loom, you know, we were used to accepting 16 shafts as a limit, or maybe 24 on some loom makes. But I thought a computer can control 240 or 500 or whatever, because it's just sending zeros and ones. And that's when I realized that well, at this course at the university, I ran into a friend of a friend of a friend who was an assistant teacher there, and we made a weave program together, which I started to use with my students at the College of Art and Design.
Oh, and when you decided to do this programming course, did you have this idea in mind of working with weaving, or were you really like new direction? How much did you connect those two before you started?
Oh, I thought if I can't make the point paper on a computer, I'm going to quit weaving, because I thought the weave structures I found interesting were too time consuming to plot by hand, and it was too difficult to predict the outcome sometimes. So I thought, if I can do it with a computer, I'm still...
So you really had a very specific purpose, and then you're like, I have to learn computer programming so I can solve this technical problem I'm having, or practical problem almost more. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I think my motivation was just that I saw I didn't have the patience, and I didn't. I think it had to do with the rest of the story, that I was not happy with the weaving education in Norway. Stopped kind of at the first floor, and there were so many more things I could see from textiles from France and Italy and Spain and of course Asia. I thought I need to go somewhere and find out how that's made.
So around what time did you finish your education?
That was in 1980.
Okay, so it's about 10 years after that before you start developing this TC loom.
Yes, but in the meantime I was involved in making a box which was on the floor under a countermarch loom, which could control 16 shafts in the countermarch, and that made a countermarch loom almost like a double loom, where you could have endless repeats in the threading.
Oh, so kind of almost like a very early stage to this later process.
Yes, yes. And then I realized shafts take up space, so if we could throw out those and just control the heddles, that would be the next. And so
just quickly, just for anyone listening who doesn't know the difference, so the heddle is exactly what each individual thread goes through, and normally they're tied up to the shafts. So you'll have a lot of heddles on several different shafts, and when you lift one shaft, all those heddles on that one shaft are lifted. So instead of having this thing in the middle, the shafts to lift with the heddles, you wanted to control each heddle just individually, and that's what the TC loom does.
Yes, and it's also what handweavers have done earlier, with harness looms in single unit draw looms, which have been used in Scandinavia as well. And we had one at when I was a student, but again I was very doubtful that it was a tool for me, because it took too long to tie in those loops, so I had the pattern too slow to prepare it, and then even if I could have reproduced that pattern multiple times, it was too slow.
Yeah. So in those 10 years, did you also go traveling in this period to see other textile traditions? Or were you in Norway? Or?
No, I had a exchange scholarship, so I spent 1 year in Spain, and it was at an art school in Barcelona, and the teacher I had there was wonderful. She said, you don't need to learn more techniques, you need to travel and see. So she sent me off so I went everywhere in Spain and saw textiles in churches, like in the crypts they would have these really ancient priest vestments and stoles. But I also went to contemporary art shows and made a network there, where I realized that there are a lot of artists who are exploring other paths than the traditional tapestry weaving, and so it inspired me a lot. But then when I came back to Norway after 1 year, I spent all the money and had to come home and find a job, and so it was bumpy. But then I got a phone call from the College of Art and Design, and they offered me a teacher job there
in Oslo.
Yes, and that was stepping directly into heaven, to have students my age who had applied maybe 3 or 4 times, were super motivated, wanted to learn whatever. And then I managed to get a donation, which was a jacquard loom with punched cards and a card punching bench.
Because there was no jacquard looms there before?
No.
So you brought this in?
Yeah. But and we had the single unit draw looms and several other types of looms, but I realized that I could not make the students motivated to punch the cards, sew the chain, put the cards in place, and so that meant
again a lot of work.
Yeah, the options were not tempting, and I saw that we had students who left textiles, left weaving because they felt it was too slow. They started to paint, to print, do embroidery, whatever, but not weaving. So that was where I was in 1990 when I got I'd been at the school then for 5-6 years, and I saw that we got to do something to keep the students at weaving.
Yeah, you saw them losing interest.
Yes, and so that's when I walked home and wrote that application.
Yeah, you were telling us a story about that. I really loved that yesterday when you said that. So maybe we can just take that from the beginning. There was a piece of paper just lying around.
Yeah, you know, we had the mail boxes like shelves in a space at school, and suddenly I saw one letter from the Ministry of Education, and it was an invitation to university employees to propose new research projects because the oil income had started to trickle through the system in Norway, and even education felt that they could use that money to give some new impulses. So it was an invitation to propose new research. But then I saw at the bottom of the page that the deadline was the following morning, because art schools are always very sloppy with paperwork, and I realized there was no time to have a meeting with my colleagues even. I just walked home and wrote that application about my dream loom, which would be hand operated but like an industrial jacquard, where you could weave flowers and photographs and whatever. And on the way to work next morning I handed in the application, and then it took 2 or 3 months and I'd forgotten about it. But then the school headmaster called me into his office and slammed his fist in the table like, "What is this?" Because I had bypassed all the authorities at the school, but I'd gotten the grant, got my funds, and I started the prototyping.
Yeah, maybe if you had found it earlier and you had started these talks, maybe people at the college wouldn't have wanted to go in this direction. Like, I just feel like there's so many lucky happenstances in this, that is like sometimes having time pressure just makes you just act. And you just did that, and you know, it wasn't a random idea. Clearly it was something you had been thinking about for 10 plus years, slowly getting there, and then you're like, this is the vision.
Yes, because I saw when I did get a solution to my point paper issues, that I could draw faster, I realized that that's not fun. You know, I can have a drawer full of very interesting point papers, but I can't weave them. And that's when I started to focus on the looms and exploring the available looms. And
so the solution to the point papers, was that a computer?
Yes, we made that computer program.
Right.
That guy I met, and
right. So you kind of had half of the solution to what later became TC2. You had the computer side of it.
Yes, yes, and then but that also made me. That was why I was offered the job at the College of Art and Design, because they wanted somebody younger with fresh ideas. But I didn't have enough on my CV to really get the job. But they wrote that somebody with knowledge of computers would be preferred, and I had just completed that degree at the university, so they helped me to get the job.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm also saying I was very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, not once, but multiple times.
Yeah, you really had some luck, or whatever it's called, when things kind of go the right way. Yes. I often feel like that in life, when you move in the right direction, it's kind of like doors open in almost like a little bit of a magical way. When you're going kind of wrong, it's just, it feels too impossible. And it's hard to know, like, because of course you should fight when things are difficult, but sometimes you also need to just listen to where the door is opening, right?
Yes, and I think when at that time I didn't really think about this as something that would change my life or other people's life. It was just one step at a time, seeing if this is possible, then maybe that is possible, and then kind of taking it one step at a time.
Yeah, there's a very practical approach to it. It's like technical and practical.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So, but when
you got all that money. That was where I left off.
Yeah.
I go on tangents because I get excited.
Yeah.
So you got all of this money, and then what did you do? Because you still just had a big idea. If you had known the solution, I guess you would have already started before. But
yes, you know, that's when it struck me that I need to come up with a solution, because this is not daydreaming. And I had a good friend at the industrial design department at the school, and discussed it with him, and he gave me a list of mechanical engineering companies around the Oslo area, and suggested that I call them and ask for a meeting and explain what I want, and then see where we could move from there. And so I started at the top of the list, and when I had called maybe 3 or 4 places and they were very negative, like no, that's no. But then one place, which was actually in the company in Moss, where we went.
Which later became the big collaborator that you're still working with today.
Yes. So, but it was an elderly guy who answered the phone, and he said, "Oh no, from what you describe, I can only think of one company which might be able to help you, and that would be Tronrud Engineering."
Oh, sorry. So it's a different company in Moss, but
yes.
they referred you to Tronrud, who are your collaborators. Yeah.
Yes, but now later on, Tronrud Engineering bought that company. So it's kind of like same.
Right.
So when he gave me the phone number and when I called Tronrud Engineering, I was so motivated, as I thought, no is not an answer. You know, I've got to get this. And I think I talked to Ola, the owner and the founder, and the first thing he said was they were busy with big projects way into the next calendar year, so there was no way they could help me. But then I suggested that, why don't you come and have a look at what we have at the school and we listen a little bit more, and then maybe you could write some kind of an evaluation. Will this idea be possible to realize, or should I forget it? And so that happened. Two guys came to the College of Art and Design.
So he must have found the idea fascinating somehow to make that trip, even, because if he was busy, it was easy to just say, "Ah, that sounds silly."
I think their business idea, their slogan is "We build your ideas," and you know their business idea is prototyping and making automated solutions for industry. So in a way, I think it appealed to the core of what he, and I think it also interested him that I wanted this high density, because I wanted to control quite a lot of warp threads per centimeter.
And you thought that was a technical challenge that was interesting to work on.
Yes.
Maybe he also thought he could use it in other aspects of his business. Yeah.
Correct, and that has happened multiple times. But anyway, they came, they wrote this paper, and I sent it to the Ministry of Education and said, I'll hand in the rest of the money for this year, and follow up with a new application for next year. And I got the money the next year, and that's when I engaged Tronrud Engineering. And by the late spring, we had a working prototype, and that's when I realized this is not. This is changing everything.
Yeah.
So, and in the autumn that same year, my school were invited to exhibit at the Talentbörse in Munich.
Around what time are we now?
We are in 1991, in the autumn 1991. So they sent my prototype and me and one student to Munich to exhibit at this Stock Market for Talents. It's an annual exhibition organized by the Crafts Council in Munich. Anyway, that's when I realized that this is not only my idea. It was people queuing up around our stand, and they were asking all sorts of questions, and I was interviewed by kind of local Bavarian TV stations, and I felt like, what's happening?
Yeah. Suddenly this thing I'd been living in your head for so long was out, and people were actually seeing that it was something.
Yes. But you know, in reality, the loom we had brought, the prototype, it could, instead of weaving vertical stripes, it was weaving kind of slanting stripes, and you know, we had just gone like a small step beyond what you could do on a W, but still people were very impressed, and that was when the ball started to roll, and I was invited to speak at conferences here and there, so I felt all that feedback gave me more energy to pursue the idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Because when the 2 years of funding from the government had ended, they said they had to stop, because their responsibility was not to help people make market-ready products. It was just to stimulate new research. So I was left.
Actually, I wanted to just zoom back on that, because I thought that was interesting when we talked about it yesterday. So the definition of what they were looking for in terms of what they wanted to fund. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, and the idea was in general just to stimulate a new research, but they had written that one sentence where they had written they would give special priority to applications focusing on traditional crafts and female. And that was what sparked me, because I knew nothing is more female dominated than weaving in Norway, and old craft. So
yeah, it was really like a direct invitation to you.
yes. Couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
So, and I still don't know who wrote that, but it was the starting of the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's something kind of beautiful as well about that money coming from this big, dirty oil industry that brings in so much money to the Norwegian economy, to then take it from that gigantic industrial kind of scale and then putting it into something handmade and so intimate and soft, and there's something quite poetic about that, I think.
Yes, and I didn't, in the beginning, I hadn't thought about it that way, but I realized, when I was presenting this project roundabout, I also realized that Norway was in a unique position, and after the funding had finished from the government, I got several grants. Like I got one for inventors, and I got one for female business, female starting businesses, but it was never enough money to really move forward and make a market-ready TC loom.
Yeah.
So that wasn't until 1994 when Tronrud Engineering approached me again and said, "What happened to that loom idea of yours?" And I had to give them that story. I'd applied for grants from here and there and everywhere, but never managed to get enough money to proceed. And then we had a couple of meetings and agreed that we should do it as a joint project, where they would throw in their engineering skills and I would contribute with my weaving knowledge and the knowledge of where are those weavers.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's a big part of it as well, that network that you have, because even if they had been able to develop this unique loom on their own, it's such a specialized kind of network, and how to even approach that, and so that's the human part of that is a really big part of the equation.
But it was, for me, it was a shock when we had the first market-ready version in 1995, and we sent out brochures, and it was totally dead, no response. And it was shock, because I thought when I'd shown it here and there, people were enthusiastic, but when I talked to weaving colleagues and I said, "Wouldn't you like to weave a circle instead of a square?" It was like, "No, why should I?" And then I realized weavers are so well trained that they have just accepted the limitations of the weaving. And of course there are lots of very beautiful pieces made, and mastering those limitations is totally unique.
Yeah, it's also a fun challenge in a different way.
Yes, but I was thinking about my peonies and the dragons that I wanted to be able to do that.
Yeah. But you're right, like people that then decide to stay in craft long enough to have a teaching position, they have really accepted this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also I think for some of my former students who had started their own career as artists or freelance designers, it was a too expensive investment without knowing exactly where it would take them. So, but of course there were some, and I think very, very early supporters were the Danish Grete Sørensen and Lise Frølund, who just spontaneously triggered on the idea, and they had a career already. They knew what they could accomplish in a traditional loom and what they couldn't.
The textile artists, independently working,
Yes.
And how did you come in contact with them?
It was, I think Grete Sørensen signed up for a workshop we had at the College of Art and Design, where we actually introduced that box which could control 16 shafts from the computer.
The earlier project you mentioned,
And from then on, we kind of stayed loosely in touch. And so, but I think we needed people like them, because without a few people who said, "Okay, I'll try," we would never have gotten off the ground. You know, it was the more they accomplished in their loom, the easier it became to present the loom.
It was like your proof of concept.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
I guess in a way that's also what happened at the first fair. You actually had the loom there, I was showing what you can do, but then this is like in the bigger scale, and then seeing them actually accomplish something so unique, and suddenly people could see the potential.
Yes, and these were people with a standing in the business already. I mean, Grete had designed for Georg Jensen, like table linen, and she had also made church textiles and art pieces. I think both Lisa and Grete had covered so many fields that they had a name, and people thought, okay, if they aren't buying it, maybe then.
Yeah.
But I had similar experiences from the States. I think the big difference between the US and Europe is that in the States, people seem to love new ideas just for the sake of a new idea. People would say, I like it, I'll buy it. And then that was it.
Interesting.
In Europe, they would say, who else has it? And if you didn't have an interesting list, they would stand and watch for another couple of years.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess America being a kind of younger country and very much being like innovators and wanting to push forward always.
Yes. So one of the first customers in the States was Carol Westfall. She has passed away now, but I have a sample of her on the wall there. But she came to the company and saw the prototype TC1 and just bought it just like that. And she was a professor at the university in New Jersey and organized 2 workshops where I think it was 1987. And then, so those 2 workshops signed up full within a couple of hours. And I realized later it was kind of the cream of the weavers in the US coming from all over. And
is this again this early idea, the box under the loom?
No, this was the first prototype for the TC1, which was, we had the market ready TC1 in 1995, and then that's when I said
87.
97. Sorry. But so when I sent out the brochures and expected people to sign up quickly, and nothing happened, that was when I kind of thought, where to move next, and it was contacts like Lisa and Grete who gave me that confidence. They didn't buy their loom until 1999, but this Carol Westfall in the States kind of spread the word in the States, and altogether we sold maybe 4 looms the first year, and then 5 looms the next. I mean, not enough to make a business.
All in America?
No, I think 3 in America and 2 in Europe. Yes, and then it was for 5 or 6 years. It was making that slow progress. Maybe increasing by 1 loom per year. But then we.
But it's interesting that it was so international from the beginning. It was really not an idea just for Norway. And today, still, you sell all over the world.
Yes.
I guess also because it's so specialized, so you won't have that many people in one country. You need to go global. Right?
Yes, and I think it was the contact in the States came actually from a non-weaver, but it was in the late 80s. There was a magazine published which was called Leonardo, which focused on electronic art and electronic music, especially Ars Electronica, and they had conferences in Austria and Linz. And there was one article in that magazine written by an American, John Truckenbrod, and I found it very interesting. So I wrote to her, and then I had a trip, study tour in the States, and so we met and we talked. And this was before we had the working prototype. but she invited me to come and lecture at the National Computer Graphics Association in Anaheim in California. And I was in a panel with all kinds of artists and creative people presenting different applications of computers. So that was it was blowing my mind. There were jewelry artists talking about interactive jewelry. There was a ballet dancer who worked with MIT on coming up with the best robot idea, if it should have one leg and jump, or if it should be crawling like an insect or whatever. And all these lectures were just presented within 3 hours span, and it changed my life again, you know. So that's when I went home, and this was in 1991 as well. So that was when the exhibition in Germany took place, and I got the new leads in the States. And then from there on, I think we didn't sell many looms, but we had interested people inviting me to come and talk about it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting as well that then you have people who come from a weaving background, like Greta Sørensen, and then you have people who are coming from more the computer background. And a lot of development must have been happening in those years. It was still new and exciting, and the internet was just starting and all these things. So you can kind of come at it from two angles. And I remember when we were talking yesterday as well, you were mentioning that that's still something that happens today. Sometimes you get, was it Stanford University?
Yes.
Like you get researchers in different fields that are approaching you.
yes, Stanford bought a loom for the faculty for applied physics, and Cornell University bought it. They have a lab which they call hybrid body lab, and they are collaborating with people in medicine to make pieces of textiles with sensors which can monitor body functions. But then their idea was to make it look like a tattoo or a piece of jewelry, something you could wear, and you look smart instead of looking like a patient, totally wired up. And Boulder University, it was bought to kind of a cross-disciplinary lab which was called Unstable Lab, and they accept. But basically, it's very much about engineering and using the interaction of electric pulses and textiles. But to travel to these places was also giving me more fuel and more inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. So I just thought maybe we didn't establish so much. We did a little bit, but Tronrud Engineering, you said that they very much worked on ideas, making ideas come true. But maybe you could say a little bit more about what kind of place is it? Because we went to visit yesterday. Maybe we can put in some little clips from some of the production.
Yes.
So what kind of materials and the equipment, and why does it make sense for them to work with this project as well?
Okay, so Tronrud Engineering was a one-man company initially. It was founded in 1977 by Ola Mjømet, and his idea was to automate processes. So his first customers were traditional industries in Norway who wanted just to automate the process to increase quality or reduce costs. And it was anything from packaging saw blades to packaging food in the food processing industry, like fish fillets at the factories in northern Norway. But it was all about studying the process and finding out what can be automated. Maybe not everything could, but the idea was it was a right idea to have in the late 70s, because labor costs in Norway was just increasing, and competition with the rest of the world was getting more and more difficult. So to automate some of the processes was the right thing to do. And they were early to get, for example, for a period they made all the production machines for Ericsson mobile phones. So they made kind of an assembly machine which made mobile phones, and that was a blooming business until they sold to China and moved everything there. But then their next big project was solar industry, because you need to cut silicium wafers to leaf thin sheets, which are then assembled to the solar panels you're used to seeing. So they were in the forefront of developing that technology, and at one point I think 30% of all the solar panels in the world came from machines manufactured at Tronrud Engineering. But very typical is their focus is to make a few of something. They were not geared towards mass production, and that's why somebody would always cut in front of them and do the big market.
Yeah, giant scale, low price. Yeah,
Yes.
but they were more about developing ideas and solutions, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so when customers came, it was, for example, one customer in Norway who was working with Boeing on developing vanes for the turbines for aircraft, and then they needed to develop some new technology to do this micro scale welding, and that's the kind of thing they would find very interesting, and they made a super smart machine which did this and still is in production, and it made the turbines on aircrafts less expensive to manufacture and more easy to quality test afterwards. But it's a roller coaster. You know, sometimes they talk about we're reaching the end of this market and what's going to be next. But so far they've always gotten started on something new before something plummets.
Yeah, and when you tell about them like that, it makes more sense now why they would be open to loom, because they're already ready for anything from fish fillets to airplanes. So loom is just like not weird.
No.
But I think my kind of assumption would be that more kind of industrial production places, maybe not so open-minded very often, maybe more traditionally, like exactly we need large scale, we need big clients. So it was really a good match, whoever recommended that place to you.
Yes, you're so right, because lots of people say, why did that loom come from Norway? You have no textile industry. Well, we had production industry, but not developing looms or tools. But maybe that's why we succeeded, because there were nobody there to say that that's not the way we do this. So I think that helped us in many ways. And
again, like you said, when they developed the jacquard loom, it was just kind of tweaking what had already been made, where you kind of started from scratch.
Yes, and the team which built the first prototype, it was two guys. One was a CNC operator, and the other one was more of a academic backgrounds, like in physics. Anyway, they made the first prototype, and for them this was just an engineering challenge to make small enough parts with high enough precision and make it work. And I think without their professional ambitions, we would also not have reached where we are today.
No, they must have felt motivated. Yeah. That's something you can't force on people, having that true motivation.
So when we had our 30th anniversary this summer, and both of those two guys were invited and came with pride, so I think that was great.
Yeah, that must have been a beautiful moment. I just thought that maybe now is a good time to talk a little bit about the TC2 that you established quite a long time later, like 22 years almost. Well, 20 or so years after the first one.
Yes. That was because when we made the TC1, we had no idea about the size of the market, and that's why we didn't dare to invest in automation, because you have to have an idea. Do we want to make 50 or 500? We didn't know anything, so it was assembled by hand and tested by hand, and that made the looms very expensive, because the handmade parts were expensive and the assembly and testing. So the market, we saw it was slowing down, and it was partly also because of the the exchange rate that we make this in Norway, and we're very vulnerable to dollar and euro. So towards 2010, we got to the point where we saw either we just have to throw in the towel and say this was it, or we would have to come up with a much better idea. And in the engineering company, it was like back and forth and internal discussions, and there were always some who said, enough of this loom, let's move on and do something like more, earning more money faster. But luckily in 2010 there was one big customer who had placed a big order which would tie down the capacity for many months, and they stepped back, and then they suddenly had this unused capacity, and so I threw the drawings of a new loom on the table and got them started. So
you saw your moment.
Yes,
this
yes,
yeah.
This is it. And then the criteria was we have to reduce man hours as much as we can, and we have to increase quality. So even if of the looms, if you put them side by side, they look very different, but conceptually they're identical. It's just that instead of using aluminum profiles for the loom skeleton, we use thin sheet metal which is folded to get the right strength, and instead of using injection molded plastic of the cheapest kind, we found a very expensive type that's not changing properties with increased temperature and humidity, because then we know that we can make components, pistons in the loom, which will not behave differently in the summer and in the winter, which was one of the drawbacks with the TC1 loom, that it had whims depending on the weather.
Yeah.
But also the quality testing that earlier we would need maybe one full day to assemble a module, and now that's done in 20 minutes. So when we launched the TC2, it was close to half the price of the TC1, and it was working faster, so that was
half the price and better.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So apart from like the changes you made between the TC1 and TC2, if a weaver sat down and didn't care about how it was made, I guess it wouldn't have been that big a difference. Only like in more extreme situations or over time, and but the basic of it is the same.
Yes.
But it's so much more about the production side of it and the price point, as you said.
Yeah. And it's almost like driving two different cars. That was basically all the difference.
Yeah, you're still driving your car. Yeah, but it could be very different cars. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just looking at the book that you made for the anniversary that you recently had 30 years, and I had been thinking about this and talking to Åsa about this, like wondering like how big a part of Tronrud's market is it even, this loom? Is it just like an interesting project for them, or is it actually also commercial? And it said in there that it's actually the loom, it's from Elizabeth, is the third biggest customer for Tronrud Enterprise Moss, the third. So it's really a substantial part of their business now.
Yes,
yeah?
yes. But in when we produced the loom at the main company here in Hønefoss, it was a much smaller, played a smaller role, and that was because so many of the customers they had here require entire production lines. For example, when they were in the solar cell industry, and they were making the machines, and then they would build the customer would build the factory around the machine. So that would mean maybe 150 million crowns, or so when they sold one machine, it could be like 10 looms, 20 looms. But the advantage was that they could make loom parts in between other things to kind of fill the capacity to the 100%. But in the long run, what we faced here was logistic problems, because we maybe had run out of one component for the loom, and when we asked can we have more of them, they said not in 3 months, because the capacity would be tied down to make parts for a battery factory in Sweden, for example.
Yeah.
So that was when we realized that we didn't actually fit in with a product that was produced in the same way year in, year out, more or less.
Yeah.
So that's when we got this idea that we could actually transition to the subsidiary, which had been bought some years earlier.
Okay, so it's kind of, technically it's different companies, but still Tronrud, what?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they're in the Tronrud group.
Yeah.
And their specialty is thin sheet metal processing, and all that goes with that, for example, powder coating and different robots which can cut and bend, and the idea is they came from a more mass production point, and their customers were more well, the products were generally speaking simpler, no electronics, no robots, but we thought we might just as well make the loom there and produce the few small parts from Hønefoss to Moss and assemble there, and then let the company in Moss do the marketing and handling.
Yeah.
And down there we have we are the third biggest product, and contributing well, because all other products require some project leader to be involved and come up with new solutions, make prototypes, but this runs in the same sequence all the time.
Yeah. So it's more about marketing and selling, because you already have the production up and running. Yeah, and the point you had as well about the capacity of when you don't have to put any out, you can just make sure you have more things ready to be able to assemble quickly when you have the orders.
Yes. And that also made us able to focus on more of the products around the weaving, like we sell quite a lot of these sound insulation cabinets, because the loom needs a vacuum pump, and that if that is sitting right next to the loom, it is as if you try to concentrate with the vacuum cleaner right next to you.
Yeah.
It's not damaging, but it's disturbing. So we made that cabinet, and we added shelves to the loom, so you can have the computer or multiple shuttles. And I showed you this warping box. So we feel that it has given us the breathing space to come up with more things the weavers might want.
Yeah, kind of add-ons to that, but not like, for example, shuttles. That there's a big, like, because there's a lot of small weaving accessories. This is more specifically to complement your type of looms, right?
Yes, yes. And always trying to focus on what's the most time-consuming processes left, and do they have to be that time-consuming, or can we make them more efficient?
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a thought and then it escaped me. I was wondering, and it's okay if you don't want to answer this, but just kind of what kind of volume are you operating at? Because it's a big machine, and it's not like a cheap machine. It's not like a small thing you sell 1 million of. What kind of volume are we talking in production?
It's modest. You know, we talk about between 20 and 30 looms per year, but we sell them all over the world. So it's we have customers in New Zealand, Australia, Taiwan, China, Mexico, Canada. So the only 2 continents where we have not really made a success yet is Africa and South America. And I don't think it's because we haven't really tried, because we need to have a more professional organization, and we're building that now with a service and support team, so they travel around and do installations and help customers. But I think we only have 1 Spanish speaking, and anyway, we are seeing the potential, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I guess with such a specialized and kind of more complex and more expensive object that you're selling, the support is a really big part of it. Like when we've been here these last few days, there's been a lot of stories about, oh, then you have to go there to help them install that, and then you have to go there. And I guess it's also good for your customer base that you build these really strong network and make connections all over. But it sounds very time consuming, so that's a big part of the business as well.
Yes, but that I realized that very early on that we sold the loom, and then I would contact the customer maybe 2 months later and ask, so how is it going? And then very often I would hear that they had not started to use it yet, because if it's an educational institution, most people are already busy with their schedules, students, commitments. So we realized that in order to make this into a success, we have to go there and sponsor the training and installation and make sure that they are, when we leave them, they are happily weaving on something they had wanted to accomplish, because that's when they become good ambassadors and spread the good news. And so that's the strategy we use now, and that's we're not losing money on it, but we're not earning anything either. It's kind of a zero thing.
So is your main client base institutions, like universities and schools?
Historically, that was where I had my colleagues, so that was the easiest place to start. But over the years, we saw freelance designers or individual artists became a bigger and bigger group, and then since the past 10 years, we see more and more of maker spaces like Fab Labs, and they are global, and they sometimes they just want an embroidery machine, a knitting machine, and a loom to have kind of everything to offer to people who come.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. Yeah, because Fab Lab is this concept started by MIT originally, where you can go as a normal person and access these really high technology things like 3D printing. So again, it's kind of the computer angle of the project that people are drawn to here as well.
Yes, and we saw that there are quite a lot of interior architects or interior consultants who have ideas about the fabric, but then they spend maybe a long time running around looking for it. But if they instead could make a prototype and make something that, well, looks like what they plan, it's easier to get into a dialogue with a weaving mill as well, and have them maybe make sure it's the quality is good enough as well. But so we sold, for example, one to Basque Design Center in Bilbao. Nobody could weave, but then we found out that one customer in Barcelona had a friend, and you know, it's building a family, because that has created job opportunities for many craft weavers who wouldn't have a very modest income, and then suddenly you can come to one of these Fab Labs and help them do something.
Yeah, because there's always weavers around, but connecting the weavers with these technological places, that's really interesting.
And then the new and very interesting segment is weaving mills, especially those making technical textiles, because with I mean, there are companies working with carbon fiber, with different kinds of Kevlar, and nobody really knows how would they behave in a garment or the use you have in mind. So you need to weave samples, put them through the tests, and only then can you start producing volume.
So, but you say weaving mills, so they already have looms, so it's because of the fact that you can hand insert the materials that they need the TC2s? Or?
Yeah, well, for years and years, when I talked to industry people about the TC2 loom, they would pat my shoulder and very patronizingly say that, oh, you know, it's we have looms, they weave like 400 picks per minute, and you know, no, forget about your toy. But then I think they see that if you stop a production loom to test something for 1 hour, it has a price tag.
That's expensive. That makes sense. Yeah.
And so, and very often the designer is working in this vacuum between the customer and the production. and maybe have made the sketch and have a ready design, and then you're told to come back next Thursday between 2 and 3, and then if you can't figure out what you want in that 1 hour, the slot closes and you have to find another one.
Yeah, I used to work at a weaving mill in Italy, and we had a design department there, and I would always have lots of designs ready, because then suddenly it's like, oh, we have half an hour between weaving, so I have to run over there and just quickly be able to do my tests.
Exactly.
But then if you're not even at the weaving mill and have that opportunity, that must be really difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think by having that, I mean, more and more now we see that they start understanding that if such a loom is in the design office, maybe right next to the desk of the designer, they can test material combinations, weave structures, and maybe not to the production ready result, but so that you can start a sensible discussion with the technicians in the factory or the customer, and that's cutting down the sample time in the factory.
Yeah, and weaving really isn't something you can sketch in the same way that you can a lot of other things. You really have to see how the materials act together.
Yes, yes. So I think it has taken near 30 years, but now, like recently we had a British mill in here, and they were weaving blinds, and it was but they said all their looms ran full capacity all the time. So if you want to test something, you have to have a hand do.
That's a really good point. What about something like fashion houses or specialized design studios? Do you have any of those? Because that would also be kind of obvious.
A few only, and I think it is because something about the education of fashion designers, they have never been made aware that you can actually define the fabric. And I think they have this idea, just like you run out and you find the fabric and you buy it, and then you run back and stitch whatever.
Yeah.
But it's,
maybe you can print on it or color it,
yeah.
but that's about the limitations.
Yeah. So we do get requests, and the encouraging thing is that at least they found out about us, but they want what they ask for maybe delivered by tomorrow morning, and that's I think there's a process here we need to.
Yeah, I used to work for fashion. It was always the thing. Can you have it yesterday?
Yes, yes.
You know, well, it's hand weaving. It takes a little while. You know.
Yes, yes. But I think I usually use this one example that Issey Miyake. He did it. You know, he went to the Ryukyu Islands in the south of Japan and talked to the craft weavers who were weaving banana fibers, and asked, can you make something that's really stiff in one direction and folding in the other? And then came back a few weeks later and saw the samples, and that's what put him on the track of his very sculptural garments, maybe some 20 years ago now. But I mean, have a dialogue with the weavers and you can get much further.
Yeah. But it takes that kind of more visionary approach. I think often in a lot of design and fashion it's like, oh, you have a deadline, oh, you have a deadline. That makes it hard to kind of slow down and make those wise decisions.
Yes,
but, yeah.
yes.
Can you see that kind of developing more as a market in the future? Or what do you think your future client base looks like?
I think it's going to develop in that direction, and I think it's going to be many different factors at play. Like I mentioned yesterday, that there are actually new design programs arriving in the market, which are more parametric design programs where you work like an engineer would do with the flow charts. I think it's opening the door for a different kind of weavers who have learned, who just think of weaving as a small-scale architecture. And I think the technical textiles have made lots of people start exploring soft textiles as well. So I think, but I think unless a fashion designer collaborates with a weaver or starts figuring out a little bit more about weaving, that's maybe the hardest part.
Yeah, definitely need some collaboration there. Okay, let me just check what we have here. I was also just wondering, because something we've been focusing on before with the podcast is like the hobby business, which has become really big, especially with knitting. So I was just wondering, because this is a more specialized and expensive product, but do you get kind of more ambitious or really excited hobbyists?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think what I see is that there are lots of people who have too much. They feel inhibited. They wouldn't say, I'm a designer, or I want to create art, but they are kind of approaching it. And I think when those who buy a loom and start exploring, several of them have ended up with small-scale production, for example. One customer who bought the narrow loom, which can only weave 36 centimeters width. She has developed her own line of pillows that are kind of oblong and focusing. I mean, she's having a factory producing those pillowcases now and selling them in shops in many places.
So she started as a hobbyist, but then it turned into a business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you don't have any that do it strictly for a hobby, like I want to weave my grandchildren as a pillow, kind of like more kind of cute and cozy projects without so much ambition.
Yes, but it depends on the country, because in the States we have several of those customers.
That's what I thought you might have. Yeah.
And it's because they can afford it, and I think many of them have been good craft weavers. So they have seen more than most, maybe, what's possible. But yes, I've seen lots of weavings of dogs, grandchildren, and why not? I think why not? Because I think already there's like Walmart can take your family photos and put them on not only mouse pads and coffee mugs, but on rocking chair blankets. And I guess they're woven in China somewhere, but it's that concept that you can convert your own image into something weavable. So why not do it with better quality?
Yeah, and it's the pleasure of having made it yourself, that satisfaction.
Yes.
And I think like the point also about this podcast series being about looms is that it's a tool. It's not you're making the looms that then make it possible for other people to realize things. So I think it's only beautiful that it can go in so many different directions, from like the most ambitious to the most cozy, and going towards the big industrial scale, and also going really into specialized developments, like you said, in the medical field. And there's a really big scope on everything.
Yes.
I think that's very interesting.
Yes, and I think it's maybe more in countries like Italy, Spain, Switzerland, even Germany, where weaving has been, it was a craft, but it's so many centuries ago. In Scandinavia, weaving is something almost everybody have an aunt or a grandmother who's weaving something, and that's making it more, people have not learned to appreciate it in the right way, I think. But
there also is a big generational gap. Like, for example, a lot of people I meet, they have like a grandmother who was weaving, but it was rarely the mother and almost never themselves.
Right. That's right. And I think to make woven, I think it's in the air these days, because we want short traveled food, we want no ultra processed food, and of course we want garments where we know what fibers are in it. And there was a concept in Norway, company, I think that was translated into wool is gold, and it was you could first travel to the farm and meet the sheep, and then you would kind of go there when they were sheared, and then you would go and see the thread being made, and then the fabric woven, and then in the end, maybe a year later, you get your coat. But it's of course a concept, but it's just showing that then people who buy that coat really have a story to go with it, which is interesting.
Yeah. And if you're selling so much to institutions, that must also mean that a lot of young people are getting introduced to weaving in this way. And I know for myself, when I started weaving, we had more simple but computer controlled looms at that institution, and that made all the difference. I don't think I would have gotten interested in weaving without that, because I had been doing like pixel art and basic programming. So the thing of having a computer that was familiar was what brought me into the weaving originally. And I can imagine that happening in these institutions as well, that it's inviting people in who think differently than maybe the ones who more traditionally go towards weaving, with different kinds of temperaments.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and I think these days more than ever, because there is no 10-year-old child who has not worked on a smartphone or a tablet, and I think with that user interface, there's a possibility of reeling in more interested people at an early age.
Yeah, and you were also saying yesterday you had a lot of interesting thoughts about this, the computer side of it, of developing maybe, I don't know if you meant that you would hear or other people would, but developing that in a way so it becomes more intuitive and more easy to visualize.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think it's related to the methodology, like how to teach weaving. I think I've experienced so many times myself that when you start with point paper and explain a twill or something, people are not getting it at all. But if you think of Photoshop, even has some brilliant filters where you can change a grayscale photo into black and white and use dithering and different filters to make even a dark color or dark shade is translated into a density of black dots, and that way I think people intuitively understand the idea. If you have a black warp and a white weft, you just need to blend those points in different ways to get the shades, and that has been triggering a whole new idea for me how to teach weaving, which could be more visual. And I think when we do that, it's not because I want everybody to weave, but I think I want to remove that barrier, which was that you have to teach yourself some complex program. I mean, most industrial weaving programs takes 5 days plus to learn the basics, and then but I think new programs are entering the scene, and that is good news, because it means creative minds are looking at this.
So it's not something you're thinking of developing here, it's something that you see is already coming, and it can work with your loom.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to end up developing something, and that was because the way it started, that I made the weave program, it was fun, and I realized it has so many possibilities, but I want a fabric to touch. I don't want to look at the screen all the time. So I think, but I would like this AdaCAD software I mentioned, which came out of Boulder University. I'm so happy to promote that program and new concepts, because I think it's anything that can make weaving more accessible is interesting.
No, that's really beautiful, because it's quite a specialized craft, weaving, and often people can have an attitude of like it's a secret almost. So I really appreciate that, wanting to spread it, and like even some can be like, oh, it's for weavers, not for people who are not weavers, and you're so open-minded about that. I think I really like that. Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, I sometimes ask a weaver, so where do you buy this yarn from? And they won't tell me, as if to have that address is making you a serious competitor. I think, but that's, I hope that's going to vanish. I hope so.
I think I have, let me just check if I have anything else, because then at the end I would like to just talk a little bit about the big 30-year anniversary, because it sounded like such a special moment, but let me just check if there's anything else here. I had one question that was, how much is the passion of weaving driving the project? And I think we cannot just answer that within
100%. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think I came by everything. Just one thing maybe, but I don't think it's relevant. I was just wondering, because you started this whole project with funding, are you still using funding, or is it 100% commercial?
Yeah, you know, after the first 2 years with the governmental funding, I had these small drops of funding up until 1995. But when I teamed up with Tronrud Engineering, when I applied for funds, then they would either say that there's no, I mean, too low risk or too high risk. I mean, they would always come up with some excuse. So I just forgot. I mean, I thought it's easier to just do it.
Yeah, I guess probably like often funds don't want to fund enterprises, so it's probably working so directly with them, getting closer to market. Maybe that was it. Yeah.
But maybe then it could. Maybe I should start looking into it again, because I think with the European Union, it seems to be we frequently get requests from universities who are in big projects and they need one collaboration partner from industry. But then again, we are so small, we can't really commit to being part of somebody else's research project.
It could take a lot of time.
Yeah. So, but I think my aim has always been that we should never be a burden for the engineering company. But if we just break zero, that's okay. But of course, the recent years, the profit is better, and that's securing us and our position.
Okay, so I wanted to round off with just talking a little bit about your 30-year anniversary that you celebrated this summer. Congratulations, that's very big.
Yeah, there was my colleague Gitika who said, I think it was January last year, she said, you know, it's 30 years since the first loom was sold, and we should do something about it. And we discussed it, and then it kind of just drifted into nothing. But then I had a moment, you know, I just thought, okay, if we're going to do it, we should do it properly. And I wrote kind of a draft for her where I said we should have a conference, we should have an exhibition, we should have maybe a book or a publication, And I realized my team was all in for it, and but we had very little time, so we thought the way to, well, I thought what could be unique about us organizing it is that when I've been traveling to customers around the world, I've seen so much diversity, and I wanted to share that with the others. So I thought not only focusing on textile art or textile for interior, but really have representatives from all these different fields. And I thought first then we have to put together the program of speakers. So we wrote to each of them and asked them, and that was the biggest surprise. All of them said yes. Oh, wow. Even the person we invited from Japan, no, Taiwan, she came, and I realized that this family feeling has been present for almost all of our customers. So when we had that list of speakers, the rest was very easy, because I think people scanned through and saw, wow, somebody are coming from Aalto University talking about smart textiles, and some are coming to talk about medieval coverlets from Schleswig-Holstein or something. So it was all of this together, and we also thought that if it's going to succeed with such a short time to plan, we contacted a local hotel here and asked them when would be the cheapest to organize, and they said in the middle of the summer, because their market is businesses organizing conferences and team building sessions and stuff. So in the middle of August was the date, and then we were roughly 150 participants. It could have been bigger, but then I think this was just the size we managed.
There's also a point where it becomes so many that it's hard to even talk to each other.
Yes. So we had 2 days of intensive talks. I mean, we started 9 in the morning and went on until 5, and then after that we had an hour and a half sessions with 5 slides, 5 minutes, where we had just written in the program that whoever wants to can jump forward then and present whatever they're up to and share with the others. But I thought probably many would then instead go and have a rest or go and walk in the garden or something. But everybody was sitting through those sessions as well. And I think we got confirmed that that mix of everything was what people appreciated.
And I imagine it's all really passionate people who are really, really interested in this, so that makes a big difference. You couldn't just have random 150 people have this experience in this way.
And you know, there were some who wrote, like, especially university people, who said, if I had been invited to be a speaker, I would have made my university pay for it and I would have loved to come. But you know, that is maybe why so many of the other conferences are quite similar. It's kind of the same pool of people sending in papers. Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, we did it another way.
Yeah. Amazing. And you made this great book that you were kind enough to as well.
No, I'm proud. And then the first chapter is really touching the points I talked about, how I came to find Tronrud Engineering and how we built the first prototype and got the first positive feedbacks.
Yeah.
But then we present our team and our team of external people.
Yeah, you're really good about making it about all the people. It's not a biography in any way. It's very much you see how much it's a communal kind of venture. It started all in your ambition, but it's clearly touched so many people's lives. And just like the map of where you are in the world, it's kind of mind blowing.
And it was when we started to put this together that we were surprised ourselves.
Yeah.
I think because in the everyday life you're so busy just answering that mail and taking that phone call.
Yeah.
But yes, it's but then again, I think I meet artists or other people who work passionately with their things for 30 years, and when they look back, they probably also have a very impressive career to point to. So it's not unique, but I think it's unique that it's in weaving. That's maybe the thing.
I don't know. I think like you've made a big difference in the field.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, one last like kind of bonus question. I was just reminded of the color, and we were talking about that yesterday. The factory, like, just I don't know what really my question is, but we just noticed that you have this beautiful kind of mint color going through. And I remember we've been on the TC1 back in, it's been like 2011, just before the TC2 came, and it had like a slightly different blue, but also like a blue. So just if you wanted to say a little bit about the kind of branding on it. Yeah.
Yes, you know, when we had made since the loom was made of metal, some suggested we should paint it to fake wood and or have it black, you know, functional, easy. But then I thought something that's making it different. So we chose that green, TC1 green was more saturated color. But I remember the guy in operating the powder paint machine. He was like, women, you know, they always change their mind. Next week you're coming here and you say, want that color or that color. And kind of because I was stubborn, I thought, I'm going to stick to this color. And when we transitioned to TC2, we discussed it with an advertising company, saying what could we bring forward to the new loom to make people associate it with the TC1? And they said that color, but we should make it different. And then we went to this mint color, which is so since 2012 has been on the loom.
Yeah, so it's the same but different, and then you've stuck to that since.
Yes.
I think that's a really smart choice, like brand identity wise.
Yeah, it's like Henry Ford said, you can have a car with any color you like as long as it's black. It's like, but Hella Jongerius did paint her loom black and white, because she wanted it to be more machine-like, I mean, not so sleek.
Yeah. That is in theory something that you could order a loom in a special color?
Well,
From you?
we have discussed it,
Yeah.
but we left the idea because it's going to add cost.
Yeah.
And I think there's even jewelry designers who's working with powder coating, and it could be, well, anodizing aluminum. We could make some really interesting artwork on the front of the loom. But then again, I thought if it's used for somebody's designs, they don't want to have too much other input.
Yeah.
So we make fridge magnets, and that way you can put them on and
Right, yeah.
attach your own sketches.
Because it's so visibly different than like all the normal hand looms. You see they're always wood and they're very open. It's such a different kind of beast. It's metal and it's very solid and it's these bright colors.
Yes. But I think we're going to stick to that.
Yeah. Worked for 30 years.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. I think that was all my questions. I don't know if you have any, but I think I could really use a coffee.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Yes. I'm really drink coffee, but now I'm just.
There we go.
Yeah. Yes.